Hi, everyone. My name is Joe LaGilia, and on this episode of Not Your Average Joe, we're talking with Morgan Crackel, founder of Coffee with Character. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Joe, powered by Mortgage Message. My name is Joe LaGilia, and today I'm joined with Morgan Crackel of Coffee with Character. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Morgan, I want to just right away get into it and have our audience kind of know who you are, the many ways that you serve our community, and we'll kind of get into your story from there.
Yeah, so I have been a teacher in Plainfield for, this is my 11th year. I started teaching PE. I was at Heritage Grove for a year, and then I came to Timber Ridge. I've been there for 10 full years. I taught PE for 5 years, and then I switched after I got my master's in special ed. So I've been in the special ed department for 5 years. Special ed has been kind of near and dear to my heart my whole life. I had an uncle who had Down syndrome, and so I grew up with all of his events, Special Olympics. He worked at a workshop. Eventually, he moved into a group home in my teenage years, so we were just surrounded by that community. So when I was doing my undergrad, I kind of went back and forth, picked PE, loved PE, but then, as a teacher, if you want to make any money, you got to go back to school. So I knew special ed is what I wanted, and I toyed with, do I want to teach it? What do I want to do? I just knew I wanted it like kind of under my belt. So my school had an opening as I was finishing up my coursework, and it just was kind of an easy transition. I had lots of friends in the department that I knew could kind of help me. So I've done lots of different things in Plainfield. I've coached cross country and track and cheerleading. I've taught behind the wheel driver's ed at Plainfield Central. Wow. So yeah, Plainfield is an amazing community. I mean, that's kind of why I'm here, because the people in Plainfield are great. So I'm happy to work here.
It's so great, and I just want to just pause and say, teachers are the real MVPs in the last couple of years.
Appreciate that.
Pretty amazing.
They've been crazy, to say the least.
And you guys are still thriving and pouring into our kids, so thank you. You mentioned your Uncle Tom, and it's such a beautiful story, and a local publication here, The Patch, did just a beautiful story on you, and I think what we're here to a little bit to talk about. But maybe just go a little bit deeper with kind of that amazing upbringing that you had an opportunity to create a relationship and an understanding in a way that so many don't necessarily get to have.
Yeah, I feel so lucky, and really good timing all around for this interview. So yesterday was World Down Syndrome Day, and so I feel like social media was flooded with feel-good stories of people with Down syndrome, and the message that comes with individuals with Down syndrome from their parents over and over again yesterday I got to see is like, we wouldn't change you for the world. And I feel like that, and obviously I wasn't raised from my uncle, when he was born, but he was born in a time where my grandparents were told not to take him home from the hospital. They wanted him, the doctor said that he should be institutionalized. And can you imagine being a parent? First of all, you're flooded with emotions, this is your baby, but then having a medical professional tell you you're wrong for taking that child home. So that I just can't even fathom that, having 2 kids of my own. And my grandparents were pioneers. And my grandma, who actually, she just passed away about a week ago. She was 94. Thank you. Appreciate that. 94. She lived an amazing life, but she was an advocate for inclusion. My grandpa passed away at a young age, so my grandma was just on her own, and my aunts stepped in, and they just were really just pioneers for inclusion for my uncle. So he did Special Olympics, and that was really his thing. So that was really fun. It brought the community to us. It was people to lean on for my grandma and my mom and my aunts, but it was cool for me as a kid to just be surrounded by that. Someone with Down syndrome, and I think there's an array of disabilities that are very similar. They're just the most positive people in the room. If you've never had the opportunity to have a relationship with someone with Down syndrome, I feel sorry, but the way our society is changing, back from when my grandma took him home, nobody was inclusive. And now most people have had interactions with someone with Down syndrome, and we're lucky that society has changed our way of thought. But inclusion is constantly evolving. It's great. Our schools have inclusion. You walk into the grocery store and you see people with disabilities working at the grocery store. It's amazing, but we still have a lot of work to do. And my grandma has kind of been the role model for that. She helped start a school that my uncle could attend. Parents had to pay out of their own pockets to hire the teacher. And then they had to promise to be there every day. So, think about how far we've come,
Wow.
But she, like I said, it's just sort of my inspiration to kind of keep the ball rolling, because inclusiveness is we can always do more.
Wow.
So.
And what was your grandmother's name?
Joyce.
What a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that you shared that.
Yeah.
There's so many places I want to go with this interview. And I think I just want to first, before we kind of get into just an exciting mission that supports everything you just shared. I guess I just, if the journey that got you to where you are, just kind of speak about the experience that you've had over the last few years as an educator in the special needs area. Just kind of speak to that as far as that experience goes.
Yeah, so the population that I serve is primarily students with learning disabilities or emotional disabilities. We don't have a severe and profound population at Timber Ridge, but there's definitely still a need within our student body for inclusion. So you don't walk the halls of Timber Ridge typically and see someone that noticeably has a disability. But what I see in our students is the need for that. Like if our students haven't been exposed at school because we don't house any specialized programs like some of the other middle schools do, I want them to see that. I want them to go into the community and meet people that are different than them and be willing to be accepting. I mean, middle schoolers are middle schoolers, and we were middle schoolers once, and we made mistakes, and we learned and grew from them. So I want them to see someone who looks different than them and ask for their story and want to meet them. And, you see it there are kids who are, quote unquote different, that I've had endless conversations with students of, well, why do you think somebody acted like that? How do you think they might be different than you? Is that a bad thing? And so I think just inclusion just promotes those conversations, and it makes the community members and kids, teenagers especially, just better people for recognizing that there are people out there who are different than me. Everybody's different than me, but it's in my best interest to learn their story and get to know them rather than to judge quickly.
Yeah,
so.
well, what I love about it is I share in that sentiment that, like, for the first time in my lifetime, I feel like we are having these conversations more now than ever.
Yeah.
And they are so needed. I have 2 young kids, and I hear you speak this way as a parent and as an educator, and I'm just so grateful that you're in our community, because absolutely I want my kids to be enriched with all different walks and all different types of people to be able to share and, hey, we're different, but we're the same, right?
Right.
So this is so exciting because, you talked about it a little bit in the beginning of the interview about saying, how do we bring that into the community? And you, my friend, have come up with just an amazing initiative, amazing mission to truly bring that, be that change leader in the community. Please speak to us and take your time on the infancy stage to where you are today of Coffee with Character.
Yeah, so if I'm being totally honest, it started when I was driving behind the wheel lessons at Plainfield Central. I spent hours and hours in the summers just driving the streets of Plainfield. And at the time, Crema didn't exist. The Dunkin' Donuts on 59 didn't exist. And there's that empty, like it used to be Lockwood Dairy.
Oh, yeah,
You know what I'm talking about? Building. And it just popped in my head like, man, it'd be cool if that was a coffee shop. Like literally stone's throw away from the high school. But more so, like, of course, kids especially, they like their iced coffee. But I just had the thought of like, how cool would it be to have this like little community hub? And it just sort of popped into my mind, like we could employ students with disabilities. It could be this like community, right? A building like that. I mean, that's, my husband and I are both teachers. We have 2 little kids. We don't have a whole lot of expendable income. So I'm, and talking to my mom about this idea, she's like, well, is there anything you could do like smaller scale? Like, what an amazing idea. Like, that sounds like an awesome location, but like, obviously financially it would be a little bit of a concern.
Absolutely.
What about a food truck? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the best idea ever. If you're on social media at all, there's food truck events and everywhere you go. We went to a craft show a couple summers ago, and there's always little pop-up, they have all different taco trucks and hot chocolate trucks, and they're everywhere.
Oh, it's a hot trend. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So the more and more I thought about it, the idea of getting exposure for students with disabilities in a vocational setting. So being able to serve their community. And some students have that opportunity, but you think about most 16-year-olds can go anywhere and get a job. Now, a 16-year-old with a developmental disability might not have that same ease in finding a job at 16, 17, 18. So typically students with developmental disabilities are able to stay in high school until they turn 22. till their 22nd birthday. So that's kind of what I envision is like that 18 to 22 age where they need a resume builder because they are very close to leaving high school and going into the real world. I had a job at 16. I had something to put on a resume when I went and applied for my real world job once I was done with my education, you know? So I think we do a great job in Plainfield with vocational education. I think that on-the-job training is great, but I think that they're always looking for more opportunities for their students outside of the building. So my mom, she's a secretary at a high school in St. Charles, and she is an on-the-job training coach for one of their students in their transition program. She's a secretary, so that student learns tools of the trade to be a secretary. And whether that student wants to be a secretary someday or not, they're still utilizing her to learn kind of important vocational things. And so I think that something like a coffee truck, like that's a very reasonable job to work in a coffee shop or a restaurant, and just the communicating with someone in a professional manner, learning to use a credit card machine or take cash and count change, all really important things, kind of regardless of where they want to go. Post.
Well, one of the things that I got so excited when I heard your story was that you can see the vision for it. You think about our community, and it's just as you said so eloquently. Here in Plainfield, we do a good job, but there's always room for improvement.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And I see this being that room for improvement that you're here so that more of the community can get behind it. So speaking of more of the community getting behind it, as you shared, these things take fundraising. These things take backing. And so I was so excited as I learned more about your story, to see just an amazing initiative on GoFundMe. As of last check, over $8,000 of funds being raised throughout the community. But there's more to be done. And so kind of speak to the fundraising side of this, what that has looked like and what we want it to look like.
Yeah, so this was obviously just like a pipe dream, and I just didn't see it happening anywhere before 5 to 10 years, just that financial piece. And I am not a person that likes to ask for help, especially when it comes to money. But during the pandemic, when we were all stuck at home teaching, we had a class that had ended. There's maybe like 10, 15 kids, and my co-teacher and I were just kind of chatting with maybe 10 kids left in our Zoom, and I had just gotten a coffee mug with the logo on it to give my grandma for Christmas. She was my first customer, right?
So great.
She had a sweatshirt and a mug. I got her
so
all
great.
dolled up. But so the mugs had just come in the mail, and I was super excited about them, and so I shared it with those few students. And one of the girls said, "You need to start a GoFundMe," because she asked, when are you starting this? And I said, well, I don't know. We'll see. Start a GoFundMe. I'm going to start it for you. So she looked into it, whether she's not old enough, couldn't figure, whatever it was. And she's like, but you should start it. And I'm like, I don't know if I feel comfortable. I'll think about it. I promise I'll think about it. So a year later, my husband was out of town for the weekend, and I was left to my own, mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what do I have to lose? People aren't interested, and I don't raise money. I think it's a great idea. Let's just give it a shot. So I think I made my goal maybe 2,000, which felt lofty. And I think we raised that in 24 hours.
Amazing.
So blown away. And even if you were to pull it up, it'll say, anonymous. I can see the names when I log in. There's so many people I don't know. Wow. I've never met. And it's friends of friends, or because of the patch article. And I think other local patches picked up our patches article, and the word has just spread like wildfire. Which has been so amazing. And I could never have fathomed over $8,000. We just purchased a trailer, which was $2,700. So it's basically just a shell. So we have lots to do this summer.
Yeah.
But we paid for that, no problem. So we have plenty of money left over to rehab it.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited about
that. And I love it. I love the fact that, like you said, again, just the humbleness on your part and the community validating this idea. It's an amazing feeling. I know it was a moment for you, and it's exciting to share that moment. And there is so much more to do, and we're gonna promote like crazy that GoFundMe page and keep that moving. Yeah. Now, being the visionary that you are, we have all these funds come in because of the Not Your Average Joe audience, and we get this idea out to the community. Just talk a little bit about And this is where it really starts to come to life, right? Talk a little bit about kind of the deployment of this idea into the community, kind of where you see this being held, what events and things like that, and kind of how you can bring more awareness for the employees of this that can come together and be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that the schools are just going to be the best avenue. One, I have connections there, right? I have my own relationships with maybe the athletic directors at the high schools. That's kind of where I envision us, is maybe the football games or any sporting event. Because how cool, like Friday night football games are something I remember about when I was in high school.
Absolutely.
And you're freezing your butt off half the time. So what's better than like coffee or hot chocolate? So that's where it originated, I think, is that if these kids can be serving literally their own community, their friends, their parents, people that they know and will be familiar with at these football games on Friday nights, like how cool for them, right? Yeah. I think it's, you get your first job, like you felt cool if your friends happened to come into Applebee's where you were the hostess. Absolutely. Or whatever, right? And so I want to give our students with disabilities the same opportunities, but I think there's a level of comfort there as well. I think if they know they're serving their own community and they're in a place where they're familiar, that would be kind of best scenario for them. But then I think, like we talked about, it's a booming industry. There's tons of places we could go, and I see it outside of Plainfield too. I think that the other local communities and high schools, I hope, would be receptive to that. But so I think reaching out to those, that there's transition coordinators at each school, in hopes that they have some kids in mind for that. There is Gigi's Playhouse. I've touched base with them, and definitely still need to reach out and get a little more details. But I'm hoping that that is such an amazing. It's an advocacy center for students, for children and adults with Down syndrome, all free to the families. And was too late for my uncle to have been involved in that. But I do have some friends who have kids with Down syndrome, and they love Gigi's Playhouse. And my mom and my grandma went to every local event that they could just to support and buy a T-shirt or whatever. So I'm hoping to be able to reach out to them and just have them have my information on hand if they have individuals looking for employment.
Wow. I mean, I really am excited as you share that, just to see here soon that's going to be in our community. And as you said, where it goes from there, it's even more incredible to think about. So that's so exciting. You mentioned something, and I don't want it to be missed, because I think it's so special. You talked about giving your grandma Joyce that first cup of coffee. And for anyone that goes to the Facebook page or sees it online or goes to the GoFundMe page, there's a very specific logo that talks about coffee with character. And when you look at the font of the word character, you could tell that it's very intentional. And I would just love for you to share the amazing heartfelt story behind that logo. Yeah,
so the word character is my uncle's handwriting. And he passed away when I was in high school, so not still around to write that word for me. But he was a man of many journals. My grandma, bless her soul, hung on to one. And as we've cleared her house out since she's passed away, there was one. Like, I'm so lucky she kept on to that one, because there were hundreds, I'm sure, over his life. But if you would come to the house, he would write your name down. He loved sports, so he would, bet a quarter on the Bears game, and so he would write who was playing who each week, and just sort of random things. So I took his Hulk Hogan spiral from probably 1965, and I took it to Imagination Print and Design, which is right downtown Oswego. I work with Kelly and Ginger over there for tons of stuff for athletics over at Timber Ridge. So shameless plug for them. They're so great.
Absolutely.
But Ginger took his spiral and she pieced together the letters to spell out character in his chicken scratch pencil writing, and it turned out so amazing. But yeah, it's cool because it's just a piece of him, I think that it really embodies, he was a character. He was the funniest person. My mom always says that she'd have a boy pick her up for a date, she doesn't know him very well, and he'd walk in and be like, "Hey, Tom," and she's like, "How do you know my brother? What?" But he was a character, and everybody in the community knew him because he would ride his bike to the park and swim at the pool and do all these things, and everybody knew him because he was a character. He embodies every part of that word: hilarious, goofy, stubborn, like just great. And so that's like my constant reminder of like why I'm doing this is right there in the logo. So
what a beautiful story, and Uncle Tom, what a beautiful soul.
Yeah.
It's clear that your Uncle Tom had such an impact on you and so many, and what you're trying to do is to bring those stories and that impact to others within our community. And I just think it's such a beautiful story that I really encourage our audience to embrace it and lift you up. That's why you're here. That's why you were nominated.
Yeah,
knowing that he's one of your heroes, I would just love to maybe ask and share if there's another hero in your life that you would say is someone that you would call a hero.
Like in reference to all of this, or just
in reference to your life? Yeah.
I think probably my husband. Yeah. He is just so positive. He had a friend, one of his best friends in college, pass away. He was a first-year teacher in Naperville, and there was an unfortunate incident downtown Naperville, and he lost his life. And my husband lived it, was there, was on the murder trial, like things I could never imagine going through. And he has turned that into such a positive. Sean, the friend that he lost, was positive. He would come home and spend 5 minutes talking about the bad parts of his day, and then flip a switch and was done and was back to being positive. And so my husband really, really tries to live life like Sean did. And so because I never got to meet Sean, I wasn't around then. Yeah. But I see so much of who Sean was in my husband. And so just that positivity. My husband doesn't say bad things about anybody, and everyone who meets him loves him. And so I try to embody what he's trying to embody, just that positivity. And my husband and I actually met teaching, and so I got to see him in action. He's an amazing teacher because of that positivity. And so we just try, that's something we're trying to instill in our own kids, and keep at the forefront of our marriage and our relationships with other people.
So great. Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you to your husband for being a hero. Thank you to you for being a real community hero in our community here in Plainfield.
He's gonna be a real hero this summer when it comes time to rehab that trailer. He's got lots of work ahead of him.
Yes. And I'm excited to see and just continue following this amazing story. That's a homegrown story of Plainfield, a homegrown story with such an amazing foundation. And so just, Morgan, thank you for all that you do.
Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. And thank you to our audience for tuning in to another episode of Not Your Average Joe, powered by Mortgage Message. Be sure to visit the GoFundMe page for Coffee with Character. We'll see you next week, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.